How can you live debt-free when the dollar is debt?
From an AI perspective, what they are delivering at scale, it's going to have an impact on the world that no one understands yet.
Right now, the banks are collapsing, but nobody says anything about it. The biggest bank bailout was not 2008. It was 2023. It was called Silicon Valley Bank.
Our schools are training young people to become employees. So if you were in charge of the schools, what lessons would be mandatory in your curriculum?
If every school teacher realized there were Marxists, maybe we'd have some changes. We flew behind enemy lines, Andy. We took our guns off because it was behind enemy lines. We came as capitalists, not Marines. We walked through this little bamboo village where the mine was. And these Vietnamese people are saying, these guys are freaking nuts. I kicked this guy's duck. It looked like a rugby ball going over the I'm going, oh my God, now they're going to kill me because I killed their duck. They steal your wealth through your money, through inflation and taxation. So that's why I save in gold and silver.
Hey everybody, my name is Jason Cozens and I'm here with my co-host, Andy Schectman. Andy, how you doing?
Jason, I'm good, brother. Good to be back. And we got an amazing guest today, someone who has meant so much to me over the last several years. And I couldn't be more excited to bring him on board, my good brother, my good friend, Robert Kiyosaki. And so I'm looking forward to today very much.
Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is my honor. I look past on people say, what's the key to success? Number one is having people who are rich. Don't hang out with poor people because they drag you down. And secondly of all, you've got to know people who are smarter than you. So Andy Schectman is the smartest guy I know when it comes to the history of gold and its evolution. So he's my go-to guy I call to ask him about gold and silver. And I own a lot of gold and silver, but I can still learn more. So Andy's my guy.
I love you, Robert. Thank you, man.
And you're our guy. I remember reading your books many years ago. And actually, I told one of my sons, I've got a 32-year-old son and a 26-year-old son, both have read your books. And I told them today, hey, I've got to get back to my podcast. And I told them I was interviewing you. And they were like, shut up. No way. I was like, yeah. They'll be pleased. They'll be listening to this. But just to give some people a little bit of background, most people will know who you are. But for those of you who don't, Robert's, and he's an entrepreneur, he's an author, he's a motivational speaker. He's best known for his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which, as I said, I read many moons ago, which contrasts a couple of different financial philosophies. But he promotes financial literacy, investing in assets, creating passive income streams, and he advocates for making money work for you instead of just relying on traditional employment. You've got some fantastic ideas. I wish that I'd better implemented your strategies than I did, but here we are and we're doing our best. But yeah, Robert, what's been going on for you recently?
The reason I'm wearing a patch is because I had eye surgery, and it's better I wear a patch than gross everybody out today. But
yeah, Andy thought it was something.
I think.
Andy thought it was something else, didn't you, Andy?
He looks like a pirate. He looks tough, but he's a Marine. Marines are tough. So I think it all goes well. It goes really well.
Well, Jason, my first marriage, like 50 years ago, I am a rugby player. I'm being inducted to the Rugby Hall of Fame this year.
Oh, amazing.
It's my sport. I played for Blackheath in London and all that. It was my sport. It's my passion.
What position did you play?
I was a fat prop. I lost weight since then. But I played rugby. It was spiritual to me. And I've traveled the world. I've gone to the World Cups. I played rugby all over the world. And I'm being honored. The biggest honor I have is being inducted to the Rugby Hall of Fame in Hawaii. So that's why I love when he said you're from London. I'm going, I've been there, man. Love that place.
Congratulations.
Played for Blackheath. I loved it. I just loved it. It was passion.
Next time you're here, we'll get Andy over as well. We'll go and watch a good rugby game.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We'll pack down and have a beer.
Yeah, that's the good old days when the rugby players used to go and drink the beer afterwards. Now they're all highly tuned athletes and are not allowed to do that anymore. But it is an amazing game. It's been a lot of changes in it over time. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
No.
Robert, some of the questions that we want to ask you today, I've had the good fortune of hearing you answer them personally. And a lot of the things that you've said, I've adopted. One of my favorite phrases that I say all the time, and I owe it to you, is that you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And you have so many of these great phrases that make you stop and think. And so I wanted to ask you a few of the questions, and Jason and I did. I want to ask you a few of the questions that when I think of you, I think of some of these questions, and I'd love for the people watching this to hear the way that you look at the world. But the first question that I had was I've heard you say several times that people who are savers are losers, and that the rich don't rely on dollars, they rely on real money. In a few words, would you be able to explain those two statements, please?
Sure, it's a rallying cry of every paranoid gold bug around. In 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And on that day, the dollar became debt. And so that was ever since then, I use debt now to get rich. But there's other guys like Dave Ramsey, who's a friend of mine, who says live debt free. How can you live debt free when the dollar is debt? That's the biggest problem people have. And so they're saving money and getting ripped off. There was a book I read by Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller called The Grunch of Giants. And it says, our wealth is stolen via our money. So when these Marxist school teachers say, go to school and get a job, you're being set up by the whole government system to steal your wealth. You work for dollars, you're being ripped off by two things, inflation and taxation. Mm-hmm. Really simply, when I use debt, I get richer with inflation and I don't pay taxes. And that's why Trump and I don't pay taxes, because we use what real money is. Real money is debt. And there's this great book out I can plug for my friend, James Rickerts. If you can get it, I get the pre-copy. It's Money GPT. This is so up to date. Jason, interview this guy. This book here will scare the what out of you. Rickerts puts he sends it to me and says, now you have something really big to worry about. So all you gold bugs out there and silver bugs, this is the next one. It's because Rickerts is talking what happens when AI hits the money system.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, on that actually, Eric Schmidt, who I think was he the first CEO of Google before when the boys decided they needed someone big to get in when they wanted to float the company. He's an amazing technologist. And he was just on a video the other day. In fact, his video got banned because he made some critiques about how Google runs its business now. But he says in that video, if you can still get a copy of it, he says, from an AI perspective, what they are delivering at scale, it's going to have an impact on the world that no one understands yet. And maybe Jim is pushing into that. But one of the questions I've got for myself, and I don't know if we all have the same the answer for it, is what is this going to do to society? Yes, it will increase productivity, and I'm certainly already, my productivity has gone through the roof with AI. I'm using it, of course. I think you should always take threats also and turn them into opportunities. But there's no doubt that we're going to have swathes of people losing their employment because their jobs are going to be made redundant. And I've seen the impact that had in the northeast of England, for instance, when the shipbuilding industry ends or the coal mining industry ends. You can't retrain people very easily. Most people can't deal with that level of change. And yet here we are with AI. Yes, it'll create some productivity, and people are hoping a miracle that AI will create productivity and allow us to grow out of this debt we've got, but it's going to also create such huge disruption.
It's worse than that. Read this book, because it goes where Andy and I fit right in here. The thing that Rickerts says is that there's two kinds of crashes. There's market crashes. So we all know when the stock market crashes. We all know when the real estate crashes. But what we don't see is a banking crash. And right now, the banks are collapsing, but nobody says anything about it. The biggest bank bailout was not 2008. It was 2023. It was called Silicon Valley Bank. It bailed out the whole crypto industry on top of it. And the reason that Andy and I are such good friends is where crypto's good, money's good, and all this. But you want to know what's real. And what's real is gold and silver, Andy.
Correct.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
So please get this book, you guys. I'm lucky enough to get a pre-edition. But he says now you have something really big to worry about, and it's beyond AI.
That leads to another question, in the similar vein, and that is that one of the things that you've said that I've heard you say is that there are more employees than entrepreneurs. And it's simply because our schools are training young people to become employees. So if you were in charge of the schools, what lessons would be mandatory in your curriculum? To me, that's a big one, because kids aren't learning what's important. And you're so good at teaching people just basic things that are so important. What would be your couple, 1, 2, or 3 most important lessons to teach in a new curriculum?
I would, every school teacher throughout the world, and I was going to read this book here. It was written by a guy named Karl Marx. It's called The Communist Manifesto. Came out in 1848. And the reason I want every school teacher to read it is because when you read this book, you'll find out you're a Marxist. I'm not saying you're bad people. You're not bad people. But in 1965, I went to military school in New York from Hawaii. And my economics teacher had us read this book and other guys like Keynes and all that. Keynes is a communist. Do you know, and that affects the whole monetary system. So if every school teacher realized there are Marxists, maybe we'd have some changes. But they're good people, like my poor dad. I realize my poor dad, my whole family are Marxists. They believe in taxation. They believe in labor unions. They all this list goes on. But this is a very important book to read. It's only about 50 pages. But once you read it, at that point, Andy, that's when you go, what is real out there? Because the worst thing they say to a child today is go to school, get a job, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in that frickin' stock market. You got to be crazy. You got to be absolutely psycho to do that, man. I would just buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin. That's it. Why worry? Ain't that hard?
But people are worried. And of course, the young people. I was in Paris a few years ago. I'll never forget this. This is a wonderful restaurant where they have these big family style tables. So you're all sat on the same table with strangers you've never met before. And I'm sat next to this American couple. It was a girl and her mother. And we got chatting. And the girl said, oh, yeah, I've given up on the idea of ever buying a house. And the mum said, yeah, I've told her that there's no point. And I just felt totally devastated that people are feeling like that. And I know why they're feeling that. Of course, they feel like they're swimming against the tide because of all this money printing that keeps on going on. And of course, if you're not in the fast lane with the tide, which is what you talk about in terms of weaponizing debt in your favor, you're against it. And that's a really depressing feeling, as no matter how hard you swim, being an employee trying to save money, you just feel like you're getting further and further away from the beach, not towards it. But you've also said that it doesn't take money to make money. It takes words. And the difference between a rich person and a poor person is the person's vocabulary. So can you maybe elaborate on both of those things? What would you say? Explain that stuff about vocabulary and maybe give some advice to young people about where they start. My younger son, he's 26. He's trying to get started. He's desperately trying to start his own business, and he's working super hard at it. What do you say to people like him? What do you say? And what's this stuff about vocabulary?
Well, number one is you better choose people smarter than you. That's why I call Andy all the time. I know I have a lot of freaking gold and silver, but there's always somebody smarter than you who's more down in the weeds with it. And if you hang out and you talk to these Marxist school teachers, you're going to go to hell. Seriously. I'm serious about that. And so what I say to them is choose your teachers wisely. And that's when I was a kid. I was listening to my poor dad, PhD from Stanford, Marxist, believes in taxation. He was head of the teachers union, taxes, abolition of private property, all the things that Marx loves. My father loved. He hated the rich, poor dad. And with that, I was in Sunday school, and I raised my hand. I was flunking out of Sunday school also. And the Sunday school teacher says, why were the 3 wise men wise? And I cracked up, and I raised my hand. She goes, why? I said, because they were rich. She goes, no, that's not it. That's Sunday school teachers are Marxists also. She said, why were they wise? She says, they sought the best teacher. I'm not pushing religion, but they were seeking Jesus Christ, and the Buddhists seek Buddha, and Muhammad is all those guys. But in my world, I've always gravitated to who's the smartest guy I know and call him. If I can, Andy Schectman, and I guess it's ironic, Andy, that today we're doing this. And yesterday, I called you up. I liquidated 53 gold coins. How long did it take to go from nothing to millions of dollars, which was transferred?
Not very long at all.
One day, right? That was it.
Yeah.
No, I was out. You know what I mean? So I am liquid because I don't save dollars. I use debt. I don't say, and Dave Ramsey will say, live debt free, which is his shtick, which is I support. His ideas are very good. You don't know anything about money, live debt free. But I use debt for money because that's what happened in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And I save gold and silver and today Bitcoin because it's outside the banking system. And if I need cash, I just called Andy yesterday. I said, hey, I'm buying another gold mine. Can you send me a couple of $1,000,000? And Andy says, done. It was gone. I had it. Andy, what do you want to say about that transaction? It's a different world, isn't it?
It is. It's a normal world to me, but it's a different world to most people who don't understand how liquid it really truly is. And I think that to me has always been taken for granted. Most people don't understand that gold is wealth. And I think you look at it the same way that I do. I don't think you own gold to invest. You invest in real estate, you invest in things that produce income, but you save in gold and in Bitcoin, and you save in assets. And if you look at people who are wealthy, traditionally, it's not their bank accounts that are huge. I'm sure they're well heeled, but it's that they have a myriad of assets. And that's one of the things that that you reinforced for me in all of our discussions, is that people who are successful have assets and understand that. And those are some of the lessons that I think are so important to be learned. And that's why we thought of these questions in particular, because I think while the answers seem just easy, they're profound in how simple they truly are, that you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get ahead. You just have to understand and emulate what people who are successful have done before you. And so I thank you for that.
Choose your teachers wisely. I don't get invited to all these big symposiums and conferences and all this. I'm going, I own more gold than 99% of the people there. And this is my latest. I called Andy if I need a couple more million, but this is my latest project here. It's a gold mine in Utah. I'm not going to show the name of it. We took it public last year on the New York Stock Exchange. I've taken a company public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, a gold mine, and I'm going to do one on NASDAQ. Those are my goals. Is I want to take companies public because I'm a capitalist. I'm not a pogue stuck in that little rat race behind me, that little rat thing there. But anyway, it's the key is who's your teacher. That's why I didn't listen to my poor dad, because the number one thing that Marx said was the abolition of private property, then labor unions and taxation. I'm not trying to be political. It's Kamala Harris and Biden. And Trump is a capitalist. So when you listen to Marxists, I'm not saying one is good or bad or right or wrong. It's your free country. You choose who you want to vote for. But the most important lesson I want to drive across, I'm honored to be here with Andy. Choose your teachers wisely. Well, I call Andy up. Not only do I have access to gold and silver, but I get something more valuable than gold and silver. It's called information.
I love you, Robert. Thank you for your kind words. And the feeling is so mutual. That's why I asked you to be my first guest here. You've made such a profound impact on my life. And I'm going to make a shameless plug for the game behind you, because...
Are you enjoying the show? A quick reminder then to hit the subscribe button so you can be kept up to date about future episodes. Now, back to the show.
And I almost hate to admit this, as someone who has been in finance for so long, I got stuck in saving gold and silver and not understanding the importance of cash flow until I played your game. And I understood just how basic and simple that it is. And you often emphasize the key to financial freedom is converting earned income into passive and or portfolio income. And you eloquently, and I know it wasn't something that just happened overnight. I know that you put a lot of thought in developing that game and years into developing it. Could you just explain a little bit about what you mean about converting earned income into passive or portfolio income, because it's such an important thing for people to understand.
So let me step back just one quick second. This is called financial education you're about to get. But a lot of times this could be simple. I hold this up and I hold this up. This is a 1964 Kennedy half dollar. Which is worth more, half dollar or $10? The average person will go for this. So they think it's cash. It's not the cash, it's the asset the cash flow comes from. And what I'm doing is when I called Andy yesterday to liquidate about $2 million, is I'm going back into another asset so I can come and I'm converting them to on the fast track there. So Buffett says you want warrants, and my company issued warrants. That's why I called Andy up. I said, "Holy moly! Back up the truck. Get that gold out of get that gold out of Andy's safe, and let's get it into warrants." I'm learning also every day. I'm learning, and so that's why, Jason, what you're doing, it's not about the answer. It's about the stimulation, the desire to learn. But that's what our schools take away because they give you this stupid answer like save money. Oh, I'm saving money. You buy a house. I bought a house. Well, how stupid is that? How stupid are you? How stupid would you choose this over this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then look at this here. I keep this here as a reminder. I think it's $10 million. And I was in Zimbabwe when it came down. I'm always in the wrong place at the right time. When this place crashed, and they took me away with guns. They took over the Zimbabwe government. So I was in the wrong place at the right time. I was also a pilot in Vietnam when I bought my first gold, because I was a pilot in Vietnam in 72 when my rich dad said, "Hey, watch out. Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard." So that was August 15th, 1971. And January, I'm flying in Vietnam. And my rich dad says, "You better find some gold." I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." So the problem was a good idea. And so I looked at the map of Vietnam. And I was a carrier, as a Marine pilot flying off a carrier. And the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, had run south. So they were kicking our asses. They were kicking our asses. They were just killing us. The U.S. couldn't stop them. So I look at the map and I goes, "Oh, a gold mine." One big problem. Gold mine was behind enemy lines now. We flew behind enemy lines, Andy. We sat there and I said, "Okay." And we took our guns off because it was behind enemy lines. We came as capitalists, not Marines. We walked through this little bamboo village where the mine was. And these Vietnamese people are saying, "Are these guys freaking nuts? Are they nuts?" So, Jason, we're rugby players and Marines. So it's a double stupidity. So we all walk up to this little shed, this little bamboo shed. There's no safe, nothing. This little Vietnamese woman is selling gold for the gold mine. And she has bright red teeth because the Vietnamese chew on beetle nuts. And so my co-pilot and I walk up, we're unarmed. We say, "Okay, want to buy some gold?" And she holds up these vials. Still remember, I should have kept one. She says, I looked at it. It looked like raisins, Andy, painted gold. It was just nuggets. And I looked at my co-pilot. Wow. I said, "Is that gold?" He says, "I don't know. I thought you knew what it looked like." But that's when I learned something else. It was illegal in 72 for Americans to own gold. Remember that? So I was going, wow, I'm talking to this little Vietnamese woman. So she wanted $50 for it. I said, "I'll give you 30. She goes, "Spot." I said, "I'll give you 50. She goes, "Spot." I said, "Got a spot in my shirt or something?" That's financial literacy. I never knew what the word spot meant. That meant that was the price of money that day throughout the world. And that little Vietnamese woman, I don't think she went to Harvard. I don't think she has an MBA. But she was giving my co-pilot and I the biggest education of our life.
What's really cool about that story too, Robert, is that you can be in any part of the world and there can be language barriers, cultural barriers. An ounce of gold is an ounce of gold. A piece of gold is a piece of gold. It transcends all languages and all cultures and all religions.
But Andy, it wasn't pure gold. Do you know what I mean? So that's where I was going. My brain was scrambled. So then I hear this screaming and yelling from my crew chief. And I said, "Oh, shit, the NVA has caught us." So I was running at my co-pilot running at full speed through the village. The Vietnamese people are selling ducks and chickens and eggs and whatever they're selling and fruit and vegetables. I kicked this guy's duck. It looked like a rugby ball going over the. I'm going, oh my God! Now they're going to kill me because I killed their duck. You know, so I get to my aircraft. It's like this. It's sinking. I said, what happened? And my crew chief looks at me and says, you stupid son of a bitch, you parked in a rice paddy. And my aircraft was sinking in a rice paddy. So since he was the smallest, we put him in the all our crew chiefs could fly. So we put him in the driver's seat, and the co-pilot and I get on the boom of this thing right here, and we start pushing like this. And the guy turns the blade, and it's just missing the water, and it's going like this. And then he starts to rock it like this to get it out of the mud. And meanwhile, mud is flying all over us, just covered in mud. So we get out of the mud. We climb in our seats. He put it on the dike where the helicopter was stable. And we flew back to the ship just covered in mud. And we got back to the carrier. We get off the carrier, and the commanding officer says, where have you guys been? Don't ask her. Andy, I became a gold bug on that day because I know what spot means now. That's called financial literacy. Spot.
And I learned very early on in my education into gold that British fighter pilots have gold sovereign coins sewn into their belt because, as Andy said, and as Robert, gold is the only money that's accepted, valued around the world, no matter which culture, country you're in. They're not going to want to have dollars if you land in, different countries. They want to have gold.
Yeah.
As we say, it's the only form of money. Everything else is credit.
Yeah.
Except
still going back to Andy, is you've got to have somebody who's in the market every single day. That's Andy. I'm not. I buy gold mines, but I don't deal in gold.
Most of the wealthiest people that I know, they're all asset rich and cash poor. In fact, they're normally the tightest people around the restaurant table. The amount of times I've had to pay for dinner and someone sat next to me who has a net worth 100 times more than me.
But Jason, plug your card right now, man. Plug your card.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why. I set up Glint, because gold is the best store of value in the world, and it is money. But the criticism has been, but you can't use it as money. And I thought, why not? Why can't you just enable it as money in electronic payments? And that's why we created Glint, to give everybody an equal opportunity to prosper, so that when they've got their gold and they want to buy a gold mine, or they maybe something a bit smaller, they want to buy something nice, they can just simply whip out their card and just spend it with the Glint MasterCard. Literally, when you swipe this card, it sells just exactly the amount of gold you need for the transaction you're paying with into the currency of the merchant. And it's done seamlessly, isn't it, Andy? You've seen it happen. We've made gold money again. And
think about what Robert said at the beginning of the interview about Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Having money that is physically held in a Brinks vault that you have immediate access to is what really opened my eyes to this program. And for all of those people who already have set aside their physical gold, but feel uneasy about leaving their money in a banking system that is massively over leveraged and proven undercapitalized, it becomes something far greater than just the utility. It becomes perhaps a place to hold your money that you need to use for utility and not have the anxiety of being in a banking system, as Robert was saying, and as evidently Jim's new book talks about, that is teetering, if you will, on the brink of trouble.
Right. And what Glint does, it provides one of the most important words in financial literacy, like spot, but also liquidity. And what Glint does is gives it liquidity. Now, the only problem with that, Jason, is you think I'm tight now. That card would be in my hands. I'd be white knuckling it, man, be holding on. So I don't like to spend gold. I love gold. I want to hang on to it as long as I can. Anyway.
Yeah, I get that. But one of my very first investors, I think he must be about 90 years old now, he said to me, I love Glint because it allows me to put my ready money into gold. Yes. And that's what we've tried to do. I totally agree with you. Money should be something you invest in and you get your assets into businesses. And that's how you get your yield. We were talking about it on last week's podcast, I think, that people sometimes criticize gold because you get no yield on gold. And I said, yeah, but you don't get any yield on cash either. Let's try putting them both in a vault and see what happens. Of course, you can get a yield on gold. We were talking to our friend Keith Weiner from Monetary Metals the other day, and they provide the ability to get a yield on gold. And so, yes, but at the end of the day, you're taking on risk, and that's something you need to do consciously. But if you just want to save your money, your sound money, then of course we enable it to be used as money when you need it to be.
This here is a certificate of confiscation. They steal your wealth through your money, through inflation and taxation. So that's why I save in gold and silver. And now exactly the same with Glint, I can be liquid instantaneously. So that solves a big problem for me.
I like that a lot. Robert, I know it's getting a little bit long here, so we'll just speed up and ask you a couple other questions. And you've already touched on this, but in a few words, can you explain what you mean by productive debt? Because you say you use debt to become wealthy. What do you mean for the average person to understand the concept of productive debt?
It goes back to, again, let me plug my game here. This is the rat race behind me, that circle. And that's where you go to school, get a job, work hard, save money. The object of the game is get out of the rat race and get onto the fast track. And the way you get onto the fast track, you use debt as money. As I was talking about this guy Marin, we're producing warrants. A warrant is what's called a call option. This is all financial literacy. So as we're producing a call option, 99% of the people check out. They don't understand what a call option is. When I buy a property, I just bought one yesterday, it was $74 million. We're using debt, but all we put down was $10 million. So the 10 million then takes down the $74 million I think it's $74 million. And that produces cash flow. That's how, but that down payment is really a call option. And so let's say, let's keep it real simple. I put $1 million down. It's $5 million property, and it goes up to $10 million. Do I sell the property? No. We borrow the money out. We use debt almost 100% of the time, Andy. So that's why when Dave Ramsey and I get into it, I said, look, Dave, your advice of living debt-free is best for 99% of the people. But if you're going to be smarter, you have to have financial literacy, which I'm saying vocabulary. You have to have good teachers. If you listen to a school teacher, you'll go broke, like my poor dad. And besides, they're Marxists. Like the first act Biden did was cut the Keystone XL pipeline. And I'm an oil guy. I'm a hard assets guy. When he cut the Keystone pipeline, that was his first act, 2020. I was selling oil under Trump at $30 a barrel. And the moment Biden cut the pipeline, the price of oil went to 130. I knew exactly what he's trying to do because he's a Marxist. His actions speak louder than his words. That's what he did. That causes inflation, causes a gap between the rich and the poor. One more thing that fits Jason's point of view here is when you print money, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Because when you print money, the price of gold and real estate go up and stocks go up, but the price of chicken and eggs goes up also. So what Biden and Kamala are doing, I'm not vote for if you want them and they're Marxists, but have a good time. Trump is my friend. But when you print money, which they're doing, you're causing the gap between rich and poor to get wider.
Because the rich have assets and the poor are struggling to buy eggs and chicken.
Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
exactly what's going on today. And it's sad. Jason, another thing I don't have the answer to, but is what is the real cause of homelessness? It's an epidemic. You know, they say it's because of drugs, true, and mental illness, true. But that's when Biden took the wall down, drugs flowed across the border. The man's a traitor. His actions speak louder than his words. But we now have this epidemic of homelessness. And another friend, my friend fought me as an intelligence officer for the Israeli Defense League, in the Israeli Defense. She says that Hamas and Hezbollah are streaming across that border right now. They're setting up terror cells in America. Their plan is to disrupt the American economy, which makes gold, silver, Bitcoin more valuable. That's the whole thing. I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I'm paranoid about it. I flew in Vietnam and I killed a lot of people there, but we were fighting for money. You can say what you want, it was money. We were fighting for Occidental Petroleum, for oil. So everything in the world is about money, except our schools teach us nothing about money, because I would say 90% of school teachers are Marxists. They've never read this book here, and it's required reading for military school graduates. Keynesian.
Yeah, actually, that's heavy when you think about it. And I agree with you very much. I talk about it in most of my podcasts. There's something called the Cloward-Piven theory, which was a class taught in Columbia University in the 60s by husband and wife professors Cloward and Piven. And it's exactly what you're describing right now. The overwhelming of the inner cities, of the entitlement programs, of the welfare system, creating a loyal serfdom of voters that will never vote for the Republican Party. But the unintended consequences of these 20 million people that have come into the United States, if 5% of those people have ill intention, like your friend who is an intelligence officer for the Israeli army tells you is true, that's 1 million people. That's bigger than a standing army. And that's just 5%. And so, yeah, it is something to be concerned about. And it is a reason to think these are unconventional times for sure. I'm glad you brought that up.
The educational problem is, as we've been saying, is systemic. They don't teach it in schools. They don't even teach it. They don't even teach how money is made in economics degrees at universities. People are not taught how money is created, how it's created out of thin air, and about what the effects of money printing are, quantitative easing, these fancy words that they put. I remember in 2008, it's the first time I'd ever heard the phrase quantitative easing. It came up on the BBC about the crisis, and they went along the lines of, don't worry, the government is implementing a plan of quantitative easing. Can you imagine what would have happened if they'd said, don't worry, yeah, there's a lot of problems, but they're going to just print loads of money? My mother hasn't got a financial degree, but she understands that money isn't worth what it used to be. And she understands most people understand viscerally or deep down that money printing equals loss of value. If they'd said that, there would have been pandemonium. So they invented this long word, quantitative easing. They don't want people to understand. When Rishi Sunak got up, he was I think he was a chancellor at the time, and said all this inflation, it's due to a hangover from supply chain issues to do with COVID and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Not once did he mention the huge amount of money printing that had gone on during COVID. Not once. And so people and the politicians don't even understand. George Osborne, who was the chancellor, I think, a couple of chancellors before him, was caught reading a book called How Money is Made inside of the corridors of Westminster. And so nobody, and the media will say this inflation, yes, inflation is being caused because of the rising prices of apples or oranges. No, that's the consequences of inflation. Inflation is the inflation of the money supply. It's not, okay, it can be caused by supply chain shocks, etc., of course, but nobody wants to talk about, and I don't understand it, nobody wants to talk about the fact the inflation of the money supply is the biggest contributor to this. And if you look, since we came off the gold standard, inflation's gone through the roof, the money supply's gone through the roof, the debt's gone through the roof. And I've met a lot of politicians, and sometimes I don't think they're bright enough to be involved in some kind of massive conspiracy. Everyone's just going along. And it's because it's the easiest thing in the world to do. What should we do? We want to get reelected. To be honest, no matter which party you're in, we want to get elected. What should we do? Let's promise everybody what they want. Get into power, let's just increase the debt. But the big difference, I think, this time, and the US has been able to get away with this exorbitant privilege, and Andy and I have spoken on this podcast a lot, it's been able to get away with this for such a long time because you had to have dollars, you had to have US dollar debt to be able to buy oil, etc. You mentioned you're a gold trader at one point. But that game's over, isn't it? People don't have to buy used dollars anymore to buy oil.
This is exactly it. And that's what this, if we can get it, it's coming out November, I think. He says now he has something really big to worry about. It's because Silicon Valley Bank is the biggest bailout in history, and they don't talk about it. They're going to print trillions. One more thing is name of my board game is Cashflow. Today, as we talk, It's $1 trillion a year to service the interest on the U.S. debt. The question is, so $1 trillion on a $35 trillion debt, who's getting that $1 trillion? That's not a mistake. And as Andy shows up there, is that every 90 days they print another $1 trillion. This is unsustainable. So I'm glad, Jason, you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad Andy's joining with this thing. I save gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I use debt for money. I don't recommend to do what I do, but that's called financial education, financial literacy. And that's why I own so much gold mines, silver mines, and all this, just because that little Vietnamese woman kicked my ass. You know, this is spot. I went, oh my God, what does that mean? And I came back to the States, and that's when my education really began. They said, if you had brought gold back, you'd be smuggling. But I already bought a Krugerrand in Hong Kong. I still have that Krugerrand. It's safely stored in Switzerland, Liechtenstein. And so the one more thing I'll say about Andy's full service with Miles Franklin. I had a friend stand up in front of the seminar, and he says, I keep my gold at home. I said, you just invited 10,000 thieves to come to visit you.
Oh, Robert, you're a legend and a good friend and someone who I have the highest respect for. I know we've kept you long already, and so maybe next time we'll talk about the new developments with the BRICS common settlement currency called the unit, which we have been told by Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, and now the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, that will be backed by gold to a degree of 40%, redeemable upon demand. And so all the things that you and I have talked about over the last year and a half about the BRICS seems to be manifesting itself into reality. We'll save that for the next time since we're already at about an hour. But speaking for myself, and I'm sure for Jason as well, just having you grace us with your presence and your wisdom and is something that means the world to me, and I want to thank you. And Jason, if you'd like to follow up with any parting words for our good friend Robert, it was awesome really to be here with you, Robert.
Yeah, before you get into the BRICS, you have to understand history, why it's so important. And to me, history began. This is 1964. They took the silver out of this coin here, and that's why today it's less than this here. I mean, it's worth more. But if you don't understand history, and as Jim Rogers says, history proves people don't learn from history. Once you understand the history, you'll understand why Andy is talking about the BRICS so much, because that will change the world.
Hey, Robert, it's been a real privilege, as Andy says. But for our guests who've been watching, listen, you need to be buying his books. You need to be playing the games. We're going to have a few books to give away for those people who want to make some comments, interesting comments below. So make sure you put those comments in and email your interest into the email address, which we'll put in the description as well. Yeah, there's some of the books. Make sure you hit subscribe because you might have missed this video if you hadn't been subscribed to the channel. So make sure you do that. But again, I'll just echo Andy's words. Thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.